Hi, this is Paul, and this is Rough Draft for Sunday, where I go through my Sunday sermon, at least the draft that is finished by Friday usually, and see where it goes. Next week, I might do my rough draft on Thursday, because I've got a lot of traveling next week, so I might not do a lot of videos. Just be warned. I wanted to start out with some mean millennial memes. Millennials tend to get a bad rap. Dear millennials, welcome to life. That participation trophy you would get as a kid, it just doesn't work here, says the old gray-haired dude with a beard. Jude Law says, I upset a millennial so bad the other day. Both parents called me to complain. That's because they're probably not together. Usually the mom calls first. But the millennials, in a sense, have kind of a bad rap. Not too long ago, a news article came out that said 1 in 6 millennials ages 23 to 37 have at least 100,000 saved up already. What that means is that while, millennials, just like every generation, if that whole scheme of talking about people works, actually, there's a group of millennials out there that are getting down to business and trying to be a success in this world. And an article came out a few months ago that talked about the success sequence. And it goes like this. Here's the order you have to process the early parts of your life. A millennial who follows the sequence can avoid poverty. Get at least a high school diploma, college or post-grad is even better. Work full-time, then marry, then have children. Don't have children any earlier than don't have children in any of the earlier steps than what you see in this list. If you do, probably not going to have that 100,000 K in the bank. Now, following that article, Eve Tushnet wrote a very interesting article that said, what's wrong with the success sequence? And Eve Tushnet herself, you may not have ever heard of her. She's a very interesting person. She grew up in a very secular home as a lesbian and then converted to Roman Catholicism and embraced their conservative sexual ethic. And that really caught a lot of people's attention, and she's really an excellent writer. And she writes, the success sequence narrative, when deployed as advice to people in poverty, makes a misguided approach to a misidentified problem. That caught my eye. First thing she notes is that, on one level, this success sequence is really pretty obvious. Not too many people start out by saying, oh, I'll have a baby first, and I'll have lots of babies with lots of different women, or have lots of babies from lots of different men, and that will really help me get ahead in life. So a few years, and she was volunteering for about 15 years, volunteering for an organization that primarily served low-income women and families. It's true that we rarely see the city's most destitute. We see people with the motivation and ability to make and keep appointments. And almost all of our clients are women and girls, so I can't speak what men believe. But I've never met anyone who doubts that getting a high school diploma can help you exit poverty. I've never met anyone who thought that not having a job was just as likely to bring economic success as having a job. When our clients don't finish high school, it's because their lives or schools have been so chaotic, not because they don't care. When our clients don't have a job, it's because they can't find one or have other obligations like caring for children. In other words, they've already botched the success sequence and are paying for it. It's not because they think joblessness is the path to a middle-class stability. What about marriage before kids? Some women prefer single motherhood due to their assessments of the men around them. If all you see around you, if you're a woman and the only available man to marry doesn't have a job and doesn't have an education and is wasting his life on video games and shiftlessness, well, single motherhood seems like a more attractive option, but it isn't. But they know it's harder financially. Doesn't everyone? And the large majority of my clients, while reluctant to judge others' lives, believe marriage would be best for their own babies. So why doesn't it work out that way? Well, there are two main reasons. One way in which poor people are similar to rich people, one way in which they're better. The overwhelming majority of my clients believe the most secure path to a lasting marriage is sex first, then cohabitation once you can afford your own place, then marriage once you're both economically stable. Delaying sex until marriage is not merely unrealistic, not merely prudish, but risky. To rush to the altar before you've tested the relationship is irresponsible. Pay attention to that word. In fact, I'm going to highlight it here. The character trait, or rather character flaw, my clients fear most. You see, these young women who at least are motivated enough to make it to the office understand that irresponsible men are a bad risk. Moreover, when your peers all believe sex is a means towards marriage, being the one holdout does not seem like a secure path towards marriage. When delaying marriage is abnormal, it really is risky if your end goal is marriage and children, not solitary financial success. A strong religious community, or, especially for immigrant children, cultural identity can persuade young people that waiting is doable, partly by showing them opposite-sex peers, potential spouses who are also waiting. In other words, this abstinence before marriage, or even abstinence before living together, really only works when you have a group of people that are practicing and where that value is, in fact, esteemed and set up as something that is both achievable and desirable. And even then, as most of us know, not an easy standard to make because of course, biology. But these days, fewer people have those communities. The sex then cohabitation then marriage trajectory is an ethic shared by young Americans across class lines. It was the normative path among my fellow students at Yale. It worked out for many of them because they were quicker to earn what was considered enough money to cohabit and then marry, and because they were terrified enough of pregnancy to contracept or otherwise or sometimes to abort. And this is, in a sense, where abortion comes into the picture, because of these three, the third belief is the strongest and most universal. The first belief is countered by the equally strong belief that all children are blessings, even though poorly timed, unexpected, or initially unwanted children. In this regard, poor women have better morals than better off women. They're more likely to accept economic hardships, even long-term poverty, as the price of motherhood. However, this belief and the belief that abortion is wrong can be countered by the pressure to escape poverty. Remember, the goal here is middle-class security. I'm going to edit this slide a little bit. Just as an inside section, I'm worried about this whole front section, which there's a really long introduction in this sermon, and you got to watch that in sermons. Anyway, the people I speak with believe that they have a responsibility, there's that word again, to achieve economic stability. There are two conflicting impulses: to maximize your economic chances or to welcome babies as a blessing, and both those impulses are grounded in moral beliefs. And here we begin to approach the heart of my concern with the success sequence. On the surface, discussions of the sequence is morally neutral. Look, they say, we can't agree on right versus wrong, but we can agree that nobody wants to be poor, and here's something that can help, that can keep people out of poverty. This seems crass and is ignored, and it ignores how often poor people have decisions that they know will make economic success harder because they believe in doing the right thing, and that's where the abortion question comes into this. That's not really my focus in this, as you'll see as I continue. The determination to stick to outcome measures is the reason. Now maybe I'm going to doctor this slide too. The determination to stick to outcome measures is the reason the success sequence tells you to avoid out-of-wedlock childbearing, not premarital sex. If you believe the best path to marriage is sex, then cohabitation, the success sequence makes pregnancy a failure. And that's reasonable, which the women most highly motivated to escape poverty often already feel. And the women who most strongly believe babies are a blessing will never accept. But now you might say, well, Pastor, is this a sermon about premarital sex? Well, I've been noticing in the events of this week that my advice, my 2018 advice, because everybody likes to couch their moral knowledge by the calendar, my 2018 advice to college kids that may want to qualify for high office in the future is, after we spent 50 years culturally dismantling repressive puritanical Christianity, no teen drinking, and limit sex to your spouse. It'll help. What is the God of the success sequence? Not being poor is a very good thing. You get no argument with me. There's nothing good about poverty. Marrying and financial security before bringing a child into the world is a very good thing. Children love and need security, which is why having a stable marriage with enough resources to at least support that child, now you don't necessarily need a whole lot more, just, for the most part, a roof over their head, 3 square meals a day, and a couple of loving parents is really what the kid needs. Wanting to find a responsible partner is a very good thing. Only an idiot would find an irresponsible partner. In fact, most adults, when they see their children or young people that they love careening towards marriage with a highly irresponsible partner, warn against it, cringe, all of that. But what if you make middle-class success and security your God? Now, Tim Keller in his book, The Meaning of Marriage, talked about cohabitation quite a bit because it has, in fact, become the cultural norm in terms of the path towards marriage. And just about many people my age and younger first lived together before they married. They won't talk much about it. There's a little bit of shame, especially in a church context. They don't want to say things that will lose status in church. Tim Keller makes a number of observations about this. Cohabitation is an understandable response from those who experience their own parents' painful divorces. But the facts indicate that the cure may be worse than the disease. Study after study, and these are secular social science research, says cohabitation is a negative indicator of marital success and happiness. Many young adults argue for cohabitation because they feel they should own a home and be financially secure before they marry. That's the success sequence. Yet this negative attitude is contrary to the available empirical evidence, which consistently indicates the substantial personal as well as social benefits of being married as compared to staying single or just living with someone. Marriage continues to prove itself in social research as a successful institution. The report concluded, cohabitation gives men regular access to domestic and sexual ministrations of a girlfriend while allowing them to lead a more independent life and continue to look around for a better partner. Generally speaking, cohabitation tends to favor men. Now, why are we talking about any of this? Because those of you who looked at last week's sermon and knew what I was going to talk about this week say, we're supposed to be talking about Hosea. And what does this have to do with any of it? Well, the book of Hosea is a diatribe on Israel's inability to shake polytheist practice. You might say, well, what does that have to do about premarital sex and abortion and cohabitation and all of that? It has to do with responsibility. Polytheism was the way for everyone else in the world to be responsible. Why? Because everyone in the world believed gods run the world. They were the chiefs. In fact, Baal essentially means the boss. If you want to be secure, if not prosperous, take a scientific, pragmatic, and political approach to religion. This is what the ancients did. Find the God that will give you the outcomes you're looking for. And what that meant most of the time was have lots of them. In the ancient world, polytheism worked because you had lots of gods. And so you work all your different gods and you get what you need from your different gods. This isn't much different from how people are using other people. Try out lots of different girls until you find one that works for a while, and then when it stops working, find another one, and just keep going through life like that. Women do the same thing to men, right? This is how we use each other. Be a religious consumer. Now, what does our culture teach our youth? Well, parents used to select spouses for children. Now, why would that make sense? Well, because usually parents, they don't have all those hormones running through. Yeah, she might be good looking, but what are parents looking for in potential mates? They're looking for long-term values for the child that they love. Parents thought economically. Marriage, however, when it changed, became an external sign of an internal emotional expression. That's what marriage means today. And that's why it makes no sense to most people today when they look at marriage and say, why would you have a parent choose it? Because the parent has no idea how the child feels. Marriage should be based on how the child feels, not the responsible, reliable path for the child's future. Millennials are seeing the downside to change in marriage. Now, they keep picking people because they look good, they have status, they fall in love, they're looking to express what they feel inside with their life all around them. Cohabitation is both pre-marriage, without sexual frustration, and trial marriage. But here's the thing. Why has the social science repeatedly found cohabitation as a negative indicator to marital success? When you are living together, you are always applying for the position of spouse, which means don't stumble, don't screw up, they'll kick you to the curb. You're always accepting applications from others for the position of spouse. If a better deal comes along, it's your duty to dump the one you're with and go after the new hotness. You are always implicitly saying to your partner, and having it said to you, you're good enough for now and for sex until a better deal, a better whole person, comes along. You see, what happens is lots of things are happening under the surface that we're not paying attention to because we don't want to look at them. There's a lot of baits and switches in this sermon because at each moment you think the sermon is about one thing, but it isn't about that thing. It's actually about something else. Spiritual but not religious is religious cohabitation. You won't commit to one God as husband. You're always looking for a better deal. You're a religious consumer. But what if God treated you like that? That's actually what common religion is. Common religion is God saying, I should edit that slide. See, common religion is God saying, if you obey me, I'll bless you. And if you cross me, I'll kick you to the curb. And in a sense, Deuteronomy almost sounds like that. And so Hosea is actually dealing with Deuteronomy. And it's not Christianity, by the way, even though a lot of you believe it is. Here's the thing. Hosea, the book of Hosea begins, when the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, go marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her. For like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord. God is telling Hosea, go be irresponsible for me. Would you? And Hosea does. We talked about Hosea's chapter 1 and 2 last week. Hosea 3:1 begins this way. The Lord said to me, go show your love to your wife again, though she is loved by another man and is an adulteress. Love her as the Lord loves Israel, though they turn to other gods and love the sacred raisin cakes. Now, what's with the raisin cakes? Well, there's obviously some connection between, in that context, some sacred raisin cakes and worship of other religions. Religions usually have a lot to do with food and taboos and things like that. But the point of this is, all along the way, it's been Hosea's job to bodily enact the revelation of God to his people. And he does this by intentionally being irresponsible. Well, what does that mean about God? Are you saying God is irresponsible? Well, look in the mirror. Are you really a good bet? So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lethek of barley. Now, that's a lot of value. This is not slavery in pre-Civil War slavery in the Americas, which is what most of us. She fell into slavery. How? Because she got into debt. You fell into debt, you could sell yourself for a time to get out of debt. And that's essentially how credit and debt continues to work in our culture today. It's just that you didn't have a legal system. You, in fact, became a prisoner of whoever loaned you the money, and you had to do whatever they'd said until some point when, between the two of you, you can agree that your debt is paid. That's how the ancient world works. Another nasty part of this business was that masters often had sexual access to slaves. Abraham had Ishmael through Sarah. Jacob had many sons through the servant girls of his wives. It went the other way sometimes too. Remember Joseph and Potiphar's wife? That's part of what happened in the house. And it's quite likely that Hosea's wife, the one attribute she had was her looks, what she could do in bed. And so when she sold herself, this is what she was selling herself into, and Hosea had to buy her out of it. Now pay attention here, because Hosea had to buy her twice. It isn't said in the book, but normal practice of that day would be the first time when God tells Hosea to go marry a promiscuous wife, he probably had to pay a bride price. So in other words, and given the fact that she was promiscuous, it might not have been very high, because she would not have had much social status, because everyone in the village would know exactly who she was and what all the men considered her to be for. Hosea pays a large sum of money for a woman for whom her lived out virtue gave her a very low value in the community. Probably all she was valued for was the sex men could have with her. This was very irresponsible. Hosea's friends, when he did this the first time, probably said, "You're out of your mind." And Hosea said, "The Lord told me to do it." And they'd say, "Now we really know you're out of your mind." And when he does it the second time, he probably lost a good number of friends. She must have been very irresponsible to get into that much debt that fast. She is the epitome of irresponsible, but she is the picture of us. Then I told her, "You are to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man." He's bought her now. "And I will behave the same way towards you." Now this is strange, because Hosea is to hold back on what everyone would expect to be the legitimate use of his wife, who seemed to have almost no other utility beyond her sexual and reproductive qualities. And Hosea says to her, "I have bought you, but I will not use you in the way everyone else has been using you." This is a picture of God. Are you trying to cohabitate with God? This God will not be tried out by someone who is continuing to accept applications for a better deal. This God is like the best girl in the neighborhood who knows she has no peer, and so she demands nothing short of marriage from her suitors. This God is also not trying you out and keeping his options open, looking for a better deal. This God can and will commit. This God knows what true love is. This God takes in and takes on irresponsible partners and does what no reasonable or responsible person would do. Well, how can I say something like that? How can I know this God is like that? Hosea's name means help or deliverer. It also means he has saved. It's also the same name as Joshua and Jesus. Hosea is Jesus. Now, Jesus shows God's recklessness and irresponsible love by his death on the cross. And while he's on the cross, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." We are the irresponsible wife. Now, what should Hosea's wife do? She should get very practical and responsible. She has the kind of lover that we all dream about: determined, forgiving, sacrificial, committed. And this God is what we all want in a partner. But we have trust issues. This should inspire her to not only accept this love and this lover, but to emulate him, to be that kind of lover, to be that kind of person who can and will extend, that can and will be determined and forgiving and sacrificial and committed with people who are irresponsible in this world. This should make her want to be just like him.